2027, we are competing with thieves. Atiku fires fresh salvo ahead of presidential election. The 2027 presidential race in Nigeria is already producing some of the strongest political statements in recent years. Former Vice President and African Democratic Congress (ADC) presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar has accused those currently in power of stealing the election, the economy, and in his words, everything. Speaking to supporters in a video shared on his social media account, Atiku declared, "We are competing with thieves." He alleged that the people in power had first taken control of electoral process and had now taken control of the nation's economy. But Atiku's comment did not stop there. The former vice president also used the opportunity to make his position on fuel subsidy unmistakably clear, insisting that if elected president in 2027, he would restore the subsidy.
We are competing with thieves. They stole the election. Now they have stolen the economy. They have stolen everything.
So what exactly is behind Atiku's latest comment? And what do they tell us about the emerging battle for Nigeria's presidency? Atiku Abubakar is positioning himself as one of the leading opposition figures challenging the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration ahead of 2027 presidential election. His latest statement is particularly significant because it goes beyond ordinary campaign criticism. By describing the opposition as competing against thieves, Atiku is making a direct political accusation against those he says are responsible for the country's current political and economic situation. However, it is important to know that the allegation is Atiku's political claim and should not be treated as established fact. His statement comes at a time when economic hardship, the cost of living, and the consequences of economic reforms remain major concerns among Nigerians. And this is where the fuel subsidy debate becomes extremely important. Atiku has now repeatedly stated that he would restore fuel subsidy if elected president. On Wednesday, he specifically rejected suggestions attributed to his media aide, Paul Ibe, that an Atiku administration will restore the subsidy temporarily and later phase it out. Atiku said his position has not changed and insisted that Nigeria was worthy enough to protect its citizens from hardship. This is a major political and economic issue. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu announced the removal of petrol subsidy at his inauguration on May 29, 2023. The decision immediately changed the economics of transportation, food distribution, and household spending. Supporters of subsidy removal argue that the old system was expensive and unsustainable, while critics say Nigeria has carried much of the burden of the reform through higher prices and reduced purchasing power. Atiku is now attempting to make that disagreement one of the major issues of 2027 election. His message is essentially this: if the government removes subsidy in order to save money, Nigerians should be able to see the benefit of those savings. And if Nigerians are still struggling, then the government must explain where the money has gone. This is where Atiku's latest comment becomes politically interesting. The 2027 election may not simply be about personalities. It could become a referendum on the economic direction Nigeria has taken since 2023. The Tinubu administration has defended its reform as necessary measure to stabilize the economy. The government has also highlighted increased revenue and higher allocation to the state as some of the consequences of subsidy removal. Atiku, however, argues that the benefits have not adequately reached ordinary Nigerians. His proposed solution is to restore subsidy and use government resources to reduce pressure on citizens. His campaign has also described the proposed subsidy model as targeted support rather than a return to the previous import subsidy arrangement. That distinction will be important because the subsidy debate is not simply about whether petrol should be cheaper. It is about who should pay for that lower price, how the government should finance it, whether the system can prevent corruption, and whether the policy is sustainable in long term. For Nigerian voters, therefore, the important question is not only whether Atiku promises to restore subsidy. The bigger question is how will he finance, and perhaps even more importantly, what safeguard will be put in place to prevent the problems associated with the previous subsidy regime. This is where the opposition will face scrutiny. Campaign promises can be attractive, especially when citizens are struggling. But Nigerians will want to know the numbers. How much will the subsidy cost? Who would benefit? How would the government prevent diversion? Would the policy be temporary or permanent? And would subsidy restoration actually reduce the cost of living across wider economy? These are questions that Atiku and the ADC will have to answer convincingly as the campaign progresses. There is also a wider battle taking shape. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration has made economic reform a central part of its governing philosophy. Atiku is now presenting himself as an alternative. That means the 2027 election could produce a direct clash between two different arguments. One side says difficult reforms were necessary to rescue Nigeria's finances. The other says the reforms have imposed too much hardship without delivering enough benefit to ordinary citizens. The presidency has already criticized Atiku's subsidy position, accusing him of playing politics with the issue and questioning whether his position represents current economic policy. This means the subsidy debate is unlikely to disappear anytime soon. In fact, it could become one of the defining economic issues of the 2027 campaign. But perhaps the most controversial part of Atiku's latest intervention remains his statement that we are competing with thieves. That language is certain to attract reactions. Supporters may see it as a strong opposition message against what they consider poor governance. Critics, however, may argue that political leaders should provide evidence when making serious allegations of criminal conduct. Already, Atiku's statement has generated criticism and debate on social media, with some Nigeria questioning the basis of his accusation and others supporting his position. This is a reminder that the 2027 election campaign is moving into a higher confrontational phase, and the rhetoric is likely to become even stronger as the election approaches. Atiku Abubakar's latest declaration has therefore opened several political fronts at once. He has attacked the government's economic record. He has accused those in power of stealing the election and the economy. And he has reaffirmed his promise to restore fuel subsidy if elected president. But for Nigerian voters, the real test will not simply be the strength of the accusations. It will be the strength of the alternatives. Can Atiku convince Nigerians that his economic program will improve their lives? Can he explain how subsidy restoration will be financed? Can he provide credible answers on corruption, accountability, security, job creation, and the cost of living? And can ADC coalition successfully transform opposition anger into electoral support? Those questions will become increasingly important as Nigeria moves closer to 2027. For now, one thing is clear. Atiku has chosen a confrontational tone, and the 2027 presidential contest is already becoming a battle over who Nigerians believe can deliver a better future. This is Starjaysmedia. What do you think about Atiku's statement that we are competing with thieves? Do you believe restoring fuel subsidy will genuinely reduce hardship for Nigerians, or should the government continue with subsidy removal? Drop your opinion in the comment section. Subscribe to Starjaysmedia. Turn on your notification bell for more news analysis.